Welcome to the Cult of Domesticity podcast, a podcast about history, true crime, and whatever life brings us. I'm Courtney, and every week I am joined by another fascinating person. Let's see what we're going to talk about this week. Hey guys, just going to thank our Patreon members as well as some new ones for the month. Thank you, Shadira, for coming in and becoming a new patron. Also, thank you to Southern Gothic, Jules, Cara Demazio, Landshark, Murderific Podcast, Obscura, a true crime podcast, and Strictly Homicide. So if you want to help out the collective a little bit more, feel free to sign up on Patreon. And now to the episode.
Welcome back, devotees. I have a new friend with us.
Hi.
This is Meredith. She's my rugby little. I love her. She came to visit. We are 2 bottles of wine and 2 gin and tonics in.
2-ish.
We've had a day. We've had dim sum.
Quite a day, honestly.
We battled Cincinnati traffic, which really wasn't that bad.
We went to, the biggest liquor store I've ever seen in my whole life.
Yeah, we went to Party Source. It's a great place.
Yeah, that was fun.
I needed some more whiskey and gin.
So we walked in the door and they were giving us Maker's Mark. That was amazing.
I mean, I'm not going to say no.
Right.
And of course they're like, do you want tea with this? And my response is, no, thank you. Please give it to me straight. The 46-year-old one? Yes, thank you.
Yes, that.
Please, that. So like I said, we've had a day. And we're going to now tell some stories. It's late.
Love it.
We both are nocturnal now.
Officially.
I'm going to go first. We're going to talk about the Opium Wars. So what do you know about opium and or wars?
But yeah, okay, so opium and wars. Well, I know that opium, isn't DMT opium? Isn't that like what you release when you die?
I don't think
That's
so.
what I heard. Okay, well maybe I'm wrong.
You get morphine when you die. So you don't get the death rattle.
Interesting. I don't know.
It's been a year.
It has been a year. It's been a minute. I don't know. I know the opium, it's very addictive and it's used for the pain relief stuff. And it's a huge problem in Ohio, isn't it? Isn't this the opioid capital of the country? Isn't that where we live?
Yeah.
Isn't that so fun? What a fun fact.
Ohio, full of serial killers and opioid epidemic.
What a lovely pair, honestly.
Please come live here. I'm the worst, ambassador of the state ever.
We're selling it, man. Everybody is going to move here. We're going to have overpopulation problems. It's going to be ridiculous, all because of us.
Yeah.
Anyways, wars. I don't know very much about those, because I've never been in one, but I have generally idea, That doesn't sound like fun.
It's not. So, there's 2. Opium Wars. There's two. It's between Britain and, you guess?
France. Always.
No. Britain and...
France.
No.
Germany.
Wrong continent.
India.
It's from India.
Oh, wait. No. They, own India. I don't know what time this is.
I'll give you a hint. It's the 1830s to 1860s. So it's somewhere they don't own yet, which... is a very broad description.
That is a very broad description. I don't know. Wrong continent. That's interesting. Is it South America somewhere?
You were right. Semi-right continent with India.
Okay, so it's Asia-ish, at least.
It's Asia proper.
China?
Yes.
Okay. Nice. That should have been my first guess.
It's kind of the big... China was already semi-open to the West. Mm-hmm. And this is where the British were like, hey, motherfuckers, let's knock this shit open. Let's crack this walnut.
Let's do it.
And yeah, this is really where China's, I would say, hostility to the West really blooms.
Of an era, yes, if you will.
So it's really a point when China is a key role in international trade. They're very popular. And at the time, traders in opium are Britain, US, Turkey, India, Southeast Asia, as well as domestically for China. And, it's not a new thing for people to be using opium, because it's really just the poppy. So you basically break down the poppy plant into a liquid, morphine,
right?
It's opioid. You can do it in a lot of different ways. It depends on which poppy you use. That has an addictive quality. Why do I know this? I don't know.
Science.
I can't remember why I learned this, but I know it. Probably I got fascinated by something and went down a deep, dark rabbit hole. But we're not going to talk about that.
Love this.
So, the first real boom is after tobacco is introduced from the New World. Because, you know, the Americas, we had tobacco. Mm-hmm. Old World did not have tobacco in the 16th century. And so they basically would mix opioid, like dried leaves, with the tobacco. So it's like a mixed cigarette.
Interesting. Okay.
Get a little high, but not that much. The Qin dynasty in court was not really hostile to useful trade. So they're like, we're cool with trade. We need trade, as anyone does. So between 1869 and 1727, they've negotiated treaties with Russia to get furs from Siberia for tea, and they allowed to, you know, have Russians living in foreigner guest houses in Beijing. So there's like working relationships with Eastern and Western merchants, and they've traded throughout the Central Eurasian area. They worked with the Burkhan and Kazakh nomads for wool, horses, meat. So, you know, it's not like they're isolating themselves, as most people would say. They're out there doing their thing, being an empire.
Right? Just doing empire things. Just, you know, just doing casual trade, taking stuff over.
Taking over people, it's fine.
Right. Land, people, animals, you name it, I want it. Let's go. I'm an empire.
So they also understood that the southern coastal trade, which is where Western Europeans come into play, is just as important. So they developed the Canton trade system, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, they established a way to regulate trade in the 18th century, which is the 1700s. Okay. You know, that the general thing is 1800s, you like century, if it's a century, you minus one to get the...
Right, to get the hundreds.
Yeah, to get the hundreds. So,
yeah.
18th century, 1700s. So, basically, Western traders can only trade through the port of Canton, or Ganzhou. I'm going to go with that's what it is.
All right. I'm not going to correct you, because I don't know how.
The one person who will text me and tell me that, please don't. I know who you are. Please. And so within Canton, they could only reside within a certain space. So they have like a warehouse, and they can't bring their families there, and they can only stay a couple months. So they're like, okay, you can come to the city. You have your, like, the company has a warehouse, so the warehouse can stay. But individual traders can't stay very long. So imagine, think of what we have that's similar. It's like you're a traveling salesman.
Right.
So you spend a couple months in each place, getting to know it, and keep moving.
Right.
And the next one from your company will come in the next time, and keep moving, and keep moving.
So why would they do that? Why would it be beneficial to keep people moving through and not just have somebody know the area and know the people and keep selling?
Because they don't want them settled. They want China to stay Chinese.
I see.
Because they view Westerners as the other. They're different. They're not the same.
Gotcha.
They're not Chinese. So Qing officials really supervise this. They check in often. They make sure that there's only licensed merchants, so no black market anything, as much as they can. And they have a monopoly of through a guild of Chinese merchants called the Kohong, and the Western merchants could not contact Qing dynasty officials directly. So, you know, there's no really formal diplomatic relation. It's all informally through merchants.
Interesting.
That's just, you know, it's how they do business.
For something being so highly regulated, it's weird that it's so very under the table diplomatically.
It's very desperate. You know, it's not, there's no close knit. Everything's very spread out, very different. Yeah. It's weird. But it's the best system they came up with. So the Qing emperor regarded, you know, all this trade as a form of tribute or gifts given personally for his rule. Western traders, for really, had to conduct trade through licensed monopoly companies, aka the British East India Company, which anyone who's studied India knows the name. I have studied India in this period frequently or earlier, so I know a lot about the East India Company, and the Dutch VOC, which is a similar system. Mm-hmm. So both sides, like both of these companies, learn how to make profits by cooperating with each other. So instead of like they work within the system, but they use the wiggle room to be like, I know you. You know our company, you know we're good for it, and like sliding $1 across the table kind of thing. On top of it, Hong merchants and key intermediaries between both develop close relationships with their counterparts and pretty much teach them the ways of Chinese, bureaucracy.
Interesting.
And as the time goes on, we're starting in the mid 1600s. We're going to the 1700s. The demand from the British market is growing exponentially. So they're struggling to keep up. So when they're starting to trade, the British are getting tea exports from China of 92,000 pounds. By 1700, they're getting 2.7 million pounds in 1751.
Whoa.
So in 50 years, they've gone from maybe under a million to doubling and a half it. So they really fucking like tea.
Well, that's not news.
By 1800, the East India Company was buying 23 million pounds of tea per year at the cost of, ready for this?
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
3.6 million pounds of silver. Because, did I mention, the Chinese government only deals in silver?
No, you did not. Wait, so there's no currency between the two?
Their currency is in silver between international trade. You have to trade in silver.
Wow.
That'll come up a little bit.
So is there no exchange rate?
The exchange rate is the exchange rate in silver.
It's just silver.
So
it's pounds of silver.
Yeah. So it's not like they'll accept pound sterling. They'll only accept silver in exchange for things.
I'm sure that caused issues. There's no way that went over super easily. There's no freaking way. But the British were like, yeah, the pound's not important. It's fine. We'll give it up.
We'll ignore it for this, yeah. So the British are trying to deal with this trade deficit because they're giving millions of pounds of silver to the Chinese.
Right.
And they're only getting back tea to sell back to their citizens, but it takes so long to get it across the ocean and everything. So there's a huge trade deficit. And, at this time, the East India Company is in there to make a profit, and they're not seeing a profit.
Right.
That's how they ended up taking over all of fucking India.
True.
So, guess what they used to even this trade deficit?
I'm gonna guess, given what we're talking about, war. Some kind of opium. Hey, there
opium.
We go.
And where did they get it? Bengal. Because, in 1757, that's when the East India Company, yes, the company took over Bengal. Not the country of Britain. The company, a company, an incorporated company took over an entire area.
That would be like if Walmart was like, all right, we want Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That's ours now. As a state, we are Walmart.
And they have a military to do it.
Oh my god. No way.
The East India Company is fascinating in that it was a company that had bureaucrats, yes, which you expect, but they also had an army.
Jeez.
And they also could then call upon their nation to be like, hey, they're picking on us, send more troops.
And they would do it?
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's how Britain got India.
That is absolutely insane.
They kept it, the company pretty much kept it until Victoria was like, the parliament was like, this is ridiculous. We're struggling. Let's make it a colony of the crown instead of basically a colony of the company. And the East India Company was dissolved. By the way, that's not till the 1800s.
That's later.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time in between those two.
Mm-hmm. Don't worry, there's also a famine that they caused in between that.
Super casual.
Super casual. Yeah. So within this, they did a three-company shell game. So Indian cotton and British silver to China, Chinese tea and other Chinese goods to Britain. So they're just trading what goes where. So they keep moving around goods.
Okay.
To keep it balanced. On top of it, we mentioned that initially trade balance is heavy in China's favor because they want the tea, the porcelain, all these Chinese goods. Mm-hmm. But, should mention, so they want Chinese tea, porcelain, and silk. So if you've ever toured a British stately home or you've watched Downton Abbey and stuff like that, you notice there's porcelain, there's silks, or 1800s period pieces like the Duchess or Pride and Prejudice. They're wanting calico cottons and the prints. That's all Indian or Chinese. And that is too far. Okay, there we go. But China didn't really want goods produced in Britain. So this is where the shell game kind of goes through. They just keep moving things around to keep it balanced. So, like I said, they would push silver instead. And it's draining a lot of silver out of England. And this is where the poppy plants. So it's the sap of the poppy plants that has been used for medicinal purposes and recreational purposes in China and Eurasia for centuries. So it's like the same base of cocaine. It's historically been used by indigenous people for simple reasons, but they like chew on the leaf or they get the stuff. It's not as refined.
It's like, have you ever... Okay, so I went to Peru. I've been there for a while. Like, I went for a couple weeks one time. And apparently when you meet indigenous people, how they, like, instead of a handshake, they have, like, these little purses, almost like crossbody kind of size bags, and they keep them full of coca leaves. So they'll just take a few, and they'll put it in yours, and then you take a few from yours, and you put it in theirs. And that's, like, like a greeting thing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same thing, like the coca leaf and the pop. It's, like, used, but it's not abused.
Right.
Maybe a couple people abuse it, but not...
But it's not common.
No. And so...
It's not like 1980s Miami.
No, it's not white powder everywhere. Everyone has to be like, hey, you got something under your nose. Yeah. So, like I said, Britain then realizes they have this wonderful, wonderful way to get back at China. They have Bengal, and there's a profitable monopoly in opium there that they could ship to China. And by the early 19th century, there are more Chinese smoking British opium as a recreational drug than the British. Which, I mean, Britain has the same problem. You see it displayed in literature and all of that, but in China it gets worse. And all of a sudden it becomes an addiction where if you try to stop smoking opium, like straight opium, you get chills, nausea, cramps, and you can die from withdrawal.
Right, you have horrible withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, and once, like any addiction, once they're addicted, they're going to do anything they can to get the drug. Luckily, the Chinese government goes, hey, this is a fucking problem. Like you're supposed to do as a government.
Well done. Good job, China.
Good job. We're not judging our state. It's fine.
Nope.
We're not going to say anything about
Ohio's
Kasich.
got a really strong handle on it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. No epidemic, no problem here.
Just going to have some more gin.
Yeah, it's a good move.
So they... basically in 1800 banned the production and importation of opium.
China did?
Yes.
Okay.
The Qing dynasty was like, no, we're not dealing with this. This is too much of a problem. We're not getting people to work. There's people just because anyone who's ever been on a painkiller knows what opium does. You take a nice nap.
Take one hell of a nap.
It's great.
You're out for a minute.
So
I've had enough surgeries to know that you're out for a
we both
while.
played rugby. We've had enough surgeries that we're like, I'm not saying it puts you to sleep, but it makes you take a nice nap.
All I'm going to say is you're real comfortable for a while.
So by 1813, the Chinese government was like, okay, this is not working.
Right.
We are going to outlaw the smoking of opium, and anyone who gets caught breaking any of the portions law, so importing, selling, smoking, you get beat 100 times.
Ooh.
So they're gonna beat that addiction out of you. And so, naturally, the British East India Company does what?
Black market smuggling.
Yeah! Yeah! Oh my god, that voice. It's like this. So... they hire British American traders to transport those drugs into China.
Yeah, America!
The British are like, you get opium, everybody gets opium! And they did.
Wow.
On top of it, they also hired Chinese smugglers.
Right.
Basically, the British and Americans would anchor off the coast. Imagine Prohibition in America with booze, but with opium.
Ooh.
And the Chinese smugglers would come up and... it's off the Guangzhou coast and distribute it within China to a network of Chinese middlemen. So it's like a mutual British-Chinese-American system.
Oh, kind of like a cartel.
Yeah.
But with more water.
Lots more water. Cartels have lots of water.
That's true. They do a lot of boats, but I don't know.
Boats and hoes.
Boats and hoes, man. I feel like there's more boats, less hoes than this one.
Yeah, lots more boats. By 1830, there were more than 100 Chinese smuggler boats working in the opium trade at the crisis point around 1834. And this is when the British East India Company loses its monopoly. So it had a document from the crown saying, you're the only one who gets to do trade in India. So anyone who wants to do trade within India has to be part of the East India Company.
Interesting.
And this is when the British government goes, like I said, in this century, this is when the East India Company loses hold in India. and it turns over to Crown Colony. And, you know, they had been doing some shady things like famines and murdering a bunch of people. Anyways, the dealers were lowering their price for selling, like their selling price, you know, so to get people to buy and spreading addiction.
Right, you got to start the addiction, get your repeat customers, and then drive that price right up. Standard business model.
So, in 30 years, so 1810 to 38.
Okay.
Do you want to guess how much the imports increase? And they're increasing the size of the chests that are coming in. We're going to talk about chests of opium.
I'm going to guess that they doubled. Like, straight doubled.
So, in 1810, it was 4,500.
Okay. 4,500 what?
Chests.
Chests. Okay.
Of opium. In 1838, it's 40,000. That's a little more. A little more than you thought.
Yeah, a little bit.
And the Chinese are consuming more and more. And, like, basically, opium's coming in.
Right.
Silver's going out. So it's what the British want. And
they finally got something the Chinese want.
Drugs.
Right.
Who doesn't want drugs?
I mean, a lot of people, but those of us who
we are the Midwest, so that's true. In 1831, the Chinese emperor, so the Qing Dynasty emperor, was already upset about the traders breaking local laws, increasing addiction and smuggling, discovers that members of his army and government and students are smoking it. So he's like, I'm not having it. He's upset. 36, so 5 years later, they realize they need to crack down on the 1813 ban, you know, the 100 beating, lashings, that kind of beating. They went through and closed opium dens, executed dealers. It's still getting worse. And so the emperor's like, okay, gotta deal with this. Let's open up a debate on how to deal with this crisis. So, let's go over the sides. The pragmatic approach is not focused on morality.
Okay.
They were like, okay, let's focus on users rather than producers.
Okay.
Production and sale should be legalized and taxed by the government, so let's get money back in that way.
Okay.
And if we tax the drug, it would make it too expensive for people to buy, so they couldn't smoke it or use it. And if we, like, take the money, it'll help reduce that trade deficit. So, the other side, it's led by Lin Zexu, who was a Chinese government official, very ambitious and capable. So he argued that it's a moral issue. This is an evil that has to be eliminated by any means.
Wow.
You know, if you can't suppress the trade and addiction to it, there will be no peasants to work the land, no townsfolk to pay taxes, no students to study, and no soldiers to fight. So basically, you're going to cut out the functioning portion of society. There's going to be, like, bureaucrats and all that, but how are you supposed to function if you can't pay them? And then it's a continuous cycle. Instead of targeting users, we should stop and target the pushers. So this is kind of the users versus pushers debate that's, in some regards, still going on today. And in the end, Lin Zhu won the argument. So the people who are like, let's target the pushers. This can only go well, right?
Sure. I'm optimistic. I don't know about you, but let's do it.
So, we're half an hour into this. The first Opium War.
Okay. Aren't there two?
Yes! Okay. Before I start going into the first one, we're only going to in-depthly cover the first one.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a lot of the same in some regards. I know the BBC did a series on it. There's, like, a lot of other places to find in-depth. You can read books and all of that. So, we're going to whet your palate, so-and-so, to the Opium Wars. In 1839, Lin Zhu arrives in Guangzhou, aka Canton, to oversee the ban on opium trade and crack down. So, you know, just imagine he shows up in his white hat. He's like, so, this town ain't big for both of us. And he's facing opium. He's going to approach this on several levels, you know, good. First, he wrote an open letter to Queen Victoria questioning Britain's political support of the trade and the morality of pushing drugs. He was like, Victoria, do you know your people are pushing drugs? How dare they? Like, is that how you want to live and have your empire go?
I feel like there's a Mean Girls reference in there. Just a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I feel like it could be a Mean Girls thing.
She's a pusher.
She would
push people.
She's in the burn book.
For sure.
For the Chinese. And he rapidly enforced the 1813 ban. He arrested over, do you want to guess?
Give me a range.
1,000 to 5,000.
Ooh. I'm going to go kind of like on the lower end here. I'm going to guess like 2,000 people.
Close.
Was there really?
1,600 Chinese dealers.
Oh, wow.
And seized and destroyed tens of thousands of opium pipes. He then demanded that foreign companies, specifically British companies, so you imagine how happy they were about that.
Very targeted.
Turn over their opium supplies, but not for free, in exchange for tea. So he's like, okay, give us your opium, we'll give you tea, you can go back and trade that.
Okay, well, it wasn't completely fruitless for them. At least they got something in return.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't just him demanding, like a toddler, give me all your drugs.
Oh my god, now I'm just picturing a toddler being like, give me your drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Give me
He's like this rampant little baby. Give me drugs.
Yeah, the British were like, nah, bro.
Fair.
Not about that. And so Lin stopped all foreign trade and quarantined... Lin stopped all foreign trade and then quarantined all, the area where foreign merchants were confined. So remember I said in the Canton document they had to live in certain areas with their warehouses?
Right.
Yeah. Now they can't leave.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. So it's about 6 weeks of them being quarantined, and basically it's a siege. Let's not lie. It's a siege to get the opium. And finally the merchants are like, okay, bro, we'll turn everything out. So they turn over 2.6 million pounds of opium. You want to guess how many chests that is?
Like 50,000.
20,000.
Okay, I have no idea how big a chest is, though.
I'm assuming it's like a pirate chest, but without the...
Like a treasure chest, but full of drugs?
But with a flat top.
Could you imagine if you found one of those, like, buried treasure, and you were like, I wonder what's in here, expecting gold or, like, rubies or something, and you open it, and it's just opium?
It's probably really bad by now.
Probably. Does that stuff expire?
I think so. We'll have to ask People Are Wild. I feel like she would. So, Lin's troops seized all the drugs, destroyed them, and including what was being held on British ships. The British superintendent, this is my favorite bureaucracy bullshit starting a war.
I love it.
And so the superintendent was like, these ships are at international waters, and Lin was like, oh no, they're anchored around Chinese islands in between them. So Lin had 500 Chinese men destroy the opium. How, you ask? How do you destroy drugs? You mix it with lime. You know, the shit you used to put on top of bodies to get rid of it?
Yeah.
And salt, and then dumped it in the bay. And he even convinced the Portuguese, who are so well known around everywhere for going around and exploring and becoming great traders. They're like, you want us to do this? We'll just stay in this area. It's fine. It's cool. Cool. So they're in Macau, and they're like, hey, it's like, hey, you want to expel the British? Keep your trading? Expel the British. You want to keep your trading? Expel the British. You want to keep your trading? Expel the British. Want to guess what they did?
I'm going to guess they expelled the British.
They did.
Wow. I'm such a good guesser.
You're so good at this. And the British went to Hong Kong. Oh yeah, bitches, this is also how the British got Hong Kong.
Of course it is. I actually did not know that.
Yeah. I'm tired of things I wanted to talk about coming up in the news as I'm talking about them, because it's real awkward.
Yeah, I believe it.
Because I don't want to confront that yet.
Fair enough.
So, we're basically having the British and the Chinese government going back and forth. Okay, so, between the two, you know, you have the British, the Chinese just being, like, slowly building up to fire, you know, back and forth. Like, if you're gonna take two sticks and rub them together, one's the Chinese, one's the British, and they keep doing things. You know.
That's gonna build some friction.
Yeah. On top of it, many, British merchant smugglers, East India Company officials, went up to consulate officials and treaties. They don't behave like a Western society. And on top of it, British representatives in Guangzhou requested that merchants turn over their opium to Lin, specifically turn them over to one specific British official, so that the British could, the government, mind you, this is merchants, they're like, turn them over to this government official, the British will compensate you for your losses. And it's like, we're going to deal with this short term, it's not going to be a problem. Not a short term problem, because guess what happens to the opium?
It either disappears or gets destroyed. That's my guess.
Oh, it gets destroyed.
Oh, hell yeah.
They're like, hey, you know how you feel about opium? Bye. And really for the British, they're like, we'll just keep them here. This leads to a clash between the British and Chinese warship. November 1938 to January 1941.
1900s now?
18. Sorry, let me read it up.
Okay.
We're going to start with part 1, and this is pulling from MIT Visualization of the First Opium War by Peter C. Purdue. Pulling a lot from that. November 1838 to January 1841. So that's about not even 2 years. All this shit is going to happen.
Oh boy.
Yeah, let's not lie. The Opium Wars packs a lot of shit in very short years. It's not the 100 Years' War.
Well, that's good.
So, November 3rd, no declaration of war, either side, and, there's a little dramatic military action at the one by Canton Bay, on Canton Bay. So, 2 British frigates, so ships. So, there's one with 28 guns, the Voltage, and 18-gun Hyacinth, who took on the 29 British vessels blockading the harbor. So of the Chinese, there's 16 war junkets and 13 fireboats, which fireboats were packed with straw, brushwood, and covering chests of gunpowder. Their goal is basically to set them on fire and push them to the enemy, to blow up the enemy. Who do you think won?
I'm going to guess the British one. There's the whole British Navy thing, though.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah, it wasn't even close.
Really?
One of the junkets was blown to bit by a lucky shot. Other junkets were sunk, heavily damaged. Only one British soldier was wounded. There were
one person.
One guy. There was one guy.
One guy broke his arm, or whatever.
Yeah. There are 15 Chinese killed.
Okay.
So 1 wounded to 15 killed.
I will take those numbers.
Commissioner Lee sends his report back to the throne saying, what do you expect?
Killed it, motherfuckers! Basically.
Yeah, great victory. We did great. Oh my god, the British were defeated. It's amazing. Yeah. So then we have Captain Elliot, who then requests reinforcement, so he's the British side, be dispatched to Canton, so he's sending him back to, the East India Company, who then sent him back to England. Imagine a game of telephone, but actually with letters.
So, there's real records of communication. It's not just whatever you think the person next to you said.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, you're just passing the letter on, but you're in a different country, so you have to reach farther and farther. Yeah. So, we still have this debate about opium, but there's a formal declaration of war against China issued on January 31st, 1840. Not by London, as you expect, where the monarch is and parliament, but British authorities in India acting on behalf of the home government, aka London government, and they start amassing a British fleet to go to China in India.
Can they do that?
Yeah, actually they can, and they do. India's a weird situation, and no one really deals with it for a hot second. I recommend going back to the Black Hole of Calcutta episodes to talk about it, but it's very weird because it's a company, but they're given permission by the government, and the government has say on what's happening, and a hot mess?
Mm-hmm.
East India Company. In the terms of where they get their direction from in regards. So, Commissioner Lee, who is in command of the Imperial Army at Canton, and on top of, dealing with the Battle of Chumai, so the defeat they just had, is aware that basically the Chinese Navy is too weak to deal with the native these other forces directly. So the Western ships and all that, they can't deal with him. He continues to attempt to suppress, opium trap. He's not dealing with a problem in hand. Basically, he's gotta deal with all this opium. And he's not dealing with, Europeans doing diplomacy, and he misread the anger, determination, profit-seeking, national pride of the foreigners in this country, specifically the British. In 1839, he dropped a letter to Queen Victoria, but never sent it at all. So, I know, that could have helped. He tried to send another letter, actually dispatched it, but it never reached her. Later on that year. On top of it, 6 seamen are accused of murder in Hulan, and return to England, and they don't get charged. So 6 Britons are accused of murder in Colon, so they're accused of murder in China, and they get sent back to England, and nothing happens. While the forces dispatched to Canton in response to Captain Elliott's pleas arrive in June 1840. So, what do we get? And these, mind you, these are under the command of his cousin, Rear Admiral Sir George Eliot. So we have another Eliot.
Oh boy.
A lot of family love here. So this fleet, 48 ships, 16 warships of 540 guns, 4 armed steamers, 27 transports, so just to transport troops back and forth, a troop ship, a carrier for both fuel and steamers, and the troops in the form of 6 million pounds of coal, and 16,000 gallons of rum. Just love it.
It's important.
Rum is important.
It's important to morale, okay? A drunk soldier is a happy soldier.
So, total 4,000 men. And as they go on, more soldiers keep showing it.
Because of all the rum.
Basically. On top of it, the first steam and sail-powered iron warship ever built for the East India Company, and really anywhere else, named Nemesis, arrived in Macau in November 1840 after a pretty dangerous journey from England. So, new reinforcements in the 1840s bring more iron steamers, so basically iron-hulled ships, as well as sail-powered warship, and they get around a human power of 12,000.
Oh.
So not more than the Chinese, but we'll get to it. So, the British assert their authority and demand, among a lot of things, to get compensation for the opium that was seized, abolition of the Canton trade system, aka they can only trade in Canton, and the right to occupy one or more of the islands off the coast of China.
One or more?
Mm-hmm.
That's really vague.
You know, they aim high. You have to have that white man confidence. Think about it. You gotta have that big dick energy. Like, hey, we'd like one, at least, but we take more. Admiral Elliot confronted the Chinese forces by Lin, who had assembled at Canton. He imposed his own naval blockade against the Chinese and proceeded to travel north along the coastline with his own forces, accompanied by Charles Elliot, his chief diplomat on the scene. They wanted to go north to basically get to the emperor in Peking, aka Beijing. The second objective was to pressure the Qing court into agreeing to negotiations to cut off northern China from the resource-rich and really the economically important south. So they're trying to get their best economic situation trade deals in. By July, after Block Amoy or Zemin, local officials refused the location where local officials refused to allow landing. The fleet approached the Yangtze River Delta, some 700 miles north of Canton. So they've made extreme distances at this point. So July 4th, officers from the warship Wesleyan, along with the interpreter Carl Gustavla, met with local officials in Zhaojian or Suzan Island in an attempt to persuade them to surrender peacefully. They occupied Suzan, and the fleet then moved north and blockaded Ningpo, or Ningpo, which is a major port close by, but the officials refused to accept a letter setting forth the British demand. They keep going north to, and again, I'm sorry, I do not speak Asian languages very well, Tianjin, or Xianxin, and the Piho, or Hahe, the strategic waterways leading to Peking. So they're slowly moving closer to the emperor, basically. If you're going from Canton to Beijing, they're going along the coast. While the expedition is leading forward to Tianjin, the British are also working on a show of force in the south known as the Battle of the Barrier. The battle and barrier go across the isthmus, separating the Portuguese-controlled Macau to the rest of the mainland. So they're trying to gain as much control trade-wise and showing their dominance. Commissioner Lin has mobilized forces, threatening to drive the British from Macau. You know, they're going back and forth. This starts in August 19th. The British warships are silence the Chinese battery at the barrier. They go back and forth, and they destroy the Chinese military stores and then withdraw. After this confrontation and disparity of casualties, the Chinese are minimalizing their losses to the emperor on top of this. The British, I don't think we quite know how many are lost by the Chinese, but the British lose 4 wounded and no one's killed. So they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's not bad numbers at all.
No,
that's rugby game numbers.
Yeah. We got 4 wounded, no one's dead. Let's all get beer and pizza.
Solid plan.
Yeah. So the Chinese said they have 7 or 8 men killed, and an English observer said, let's multiply that by 10.
Oh.
And on top of this, Ling, remember, he reports this back again as a victory. So the emperor thinks, we're doing great, winning left and right.
Getting all kinds of false information.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't have to worry about this at all.
So I was a little worried. Because he's might be losing my position.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty good grounds to get fired from your military post.
By the end of August, the fleet carrying both Elliots reached pretty close to Peking.
Mm-hmm.
And they succeed in conveying that the British want to local officials at Tencin. They enforce the real nature of the local threat. And the emperor is pissed as hell. And all of a sudden, Lin goes from hero to scapegoat. It's Lin, this great person who's defeating the Westerners. Oh my god, he's not. Look at this person who's messed up our empire. August 21st, the emperor chastises him harshly. Quote, externally you want to stop the opium trade, but it has not been stopped. Internally you want to wipe out the outlaws, the opium smugglers and smokers, but they have not been cleared away. You are just making excuses with empty words. Nothing has been accomplished, but many troubles have been created. Thinking of these things, I cannot contain my rage. End quote. Which is a good way to say, bitch, you did not achieve what you wanted to achieve. You have not even contained the problem, and you've created more problems. So he's stripped of his imperial title of commissioner in September. He's allowed to remain in Canton. So this is Lin, that fall and winter, to help the next person. Oshan, Lin's successor, and the Mandarin appointed to deal with the British, rose and fell even more quickly. So
tough job.
It's you blink and he's gone. Lin warned the emperor that negotiating with foreign never works. Quote, the more they get, the more they demand, and if we do not overcome them by force of arms, there will be no end to our troubles. Which is kind of true, a little bit. Quishan took a softer line to trade. Okay, no, the British let them withdraw without threatening to cut off their trading privileges, making some concessions so we can keep it. He even persuaded the 2 Elliots to return to Canton instead of keep going north towards the emperor, because he's we're going to do serious negotiations. You should come back. And they even got the British to withdraw from Macau by November. So, late December, Charles Elliot begins negotiations in Canton, and, they want the opening of 5 ports of Canton, Amoy, Macau, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, cessions of an island, indemnity for both the value of confiscated opium and the cost of the military expedition. So this is going to be how they get Hong Kong for 100 years. Hushan offered only a smaller indemnity than requested, and even then he did this without the Qing court's acknowledgement. So not great. In January of 41, the British realized that Hushan was not prepared to make these concessions. They have the fleet reinforced during this time, and they're like, bitch, you wasted my time. I'm gonna make it better than you thought it could be. And they go to Chumbai and the sister fort of Takala, and really to battle over the Bukarest Taish, which leads into Canton. So they're going for the strait that leads to Canton, and they're battling it out right there. This is the second battle of Chumbai, which takes place on January 7th. It lasted an hour and ended with both forts captured, 500 or more killed, and perhaps half that number wounded.
In an hour? In 1 hour.
By, who do you think won?
The British.
Oh, of course, yeah. And the British only suffered 38 wounded. So the Chinese had 500 or more killed and 38 wounded by the other side. On January 20th, the British show up at Canton like, hey, bitches! Quishan acknowledged he couldn't really do anything. China was willing to cede Hong Kong, pay indemnity of $6 million, engage in official relations on equal footing, reopen Canton trade. So this is the Convention of Chumai, which was submitted for approval. And again, the emperor is pissed as hell.
I mean, yeah, I feel like I would be. If you lose that badly and you thought you were winning the whole time because your most trusted military advisor is like, yeah, I'm killing it. Of course you're going to be mad.
So, Quishan is then imprisoned, sentenced to death. His family's property is confiscated in May 1842. And in May 1842, his sentence was commuted. He has been banished to a remote area in the Amur River far north of China. Charles Elliot also received really a reprimand from the government, his own government, so the British government. And in April 21st, Palmerston, another British official, castigates him for having settled for the lowest possible terms and strips him of his appointment. Basically, Palmerston is like, hey, Elliot, you can't get enough compensation for what was destroyed, and how dare you withdraw British forces from strategic positions. I'm going to fast forward to the aftermath of the war just for time's sake. Okay, so it ends in 1842 with the Chinese officials signing at gunpoint. So it gets so bad that basically the British have very modern ships. They're able to move people very quickly. They can keep doing the same thing over and over and over to the Chinese, and they can't adapt quickly enough.
It does seem like they're very navally dominant.
Yeah, so it's the Treaty of Nanjing. This provides great benefits. Deepwater Port Hong Kong, they get compensation for the British government and merchants. 5 new ports, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Xiamen, Ningbo, Fuzhou. So, on top of that, the British merchants and their families could live there. They are subject to British laws, not Chinese, and they get the most favored nation clause rather than any other situation. So they get favored for their personal nation's clause, like laws over Chinese. And pretty much for the Chinese, this gives them nothing. On top of it, opium rises to a peak 80,000, sorry, let me do it. So opium rises to 87,000 chests in 1879. After that, it declines, really ending in the First World War, when production within China outgrew foreign production. So it's like, they kind of start just supplementing itself. Trade did not expand as much as the foreign merchants hoped, so they continue to blame the Chinese government. Aftermath led to a bitter struggle between the two factions. The peace faction, which was aligned with the users faction, aka we should help the users, not the pushers, and the war faction, aka the pushers. Peace was really temporary. In addition, the Treaty of Nanjing ended the Canton system, which had been in place since the 17th century. So it had been in place for over 100 years. And they were just like, nah, bro, bye. So, in 1884, a system of unequal treaties gets in place between China and Western powers. This is with the most favored nation clause. The treaties allowed Westerners to build churches and spread Christianity in treaty ports. Western imperialism and free trade is the first victory for the Westerners on this side. When the emperor dies in 1850, his successor dismissed the peace faction in favor of those who supported Lin Zhu, and the new Chinese emperor tried to bring back Lin from exile, but Lin died on his way back. The Chinese court kept trying to bring back excuses, but couldn't deal with it. So, second, you open a new war. And I'm going to go faster on this one, just to get through it. 1856, it breaks out and continues till 1860. The British and the French end up capturing Beijing, forcing China into a new round of unequal treaties. So basically, treaties were broken, disagreements about how they should be interpreted. The French are now involved.
Of course.
And so we get unequal treaties, indemnities, aka concessions, and opening of 11 more port cities. So they keep opening more ports on the coast to the Westerners. Because they want to trade more.
Oh, okay.
And so it's easier to trade with a bunch of different cities to get all of that. So think of it, if you can only trade with New York, so you can only go to New York.
Okay.
Versus being able to go up to all the cities on the coast.
Right. That makes sense.
You want to go to all the cities on the coast because you can, do better. On top of it, there's increased Christian missionary work and legalization of the opium trade. They have new ports that are open, and the Chinese are slow on implementing agreements and implementing the legal trade, so they're just, they know they have to do it, but they're like, I'm going to be eternal about this, so we don't have to deal with it. British merchants are like, hey, government, you represent me, let's get this done. Government's hands are tied, and they keep trying to work through it. Meanwhile, the British realize they can use this. They're like, hey, you're not doing this. We can crack open that walnut further. So they keep slowly, if you imagine a walnut, they keep cracking it further and further open. They're like, we can do this.
Are you saying the British are after that sweet, sweet nut?
They are after that sweet, sweet nut. So, basically, we're going to speed through a lot of this.
Okay.
There's a lot of negotiation. Again, there's a lot of great books that cover this, and I should cover them in 2 separate episodes, but it's late. It's 1 a.m. So the war ends with a really weakened Qing dynasty now realizing they need to reconfront their relationship with the outside world, modernize their military, political, economic power, because they could not deal with the Western pressure. After this, we have in 1839, we have them imposing on China the free trade and legal rights of their citizens, aka British citizens. Well, the Chinese critics point out that the British made all these arguments about the principle of free trade and individual rights, and they're pushing opium, which is illegal in the country. And we then turn this idea to confront the different ideas of the Opium War for the British. Some in the West claim that the Opium Wars were about upholding ideas of free trade, so we can't help it that your country wants opium, And others say British were acting in interest of protecting international reputation, challenging other parts of the world. Some American historians are saying these conflicts are not as much about opium, but about Western powers' desire to expand commercially. So it's more of an economic issue over the Chinese trading system. Others say it was to deal with the trade deficit and to even keep negatively on the Chinese society. But really, I think the key thing to understand is this broke up a system that was 100 years old, that was working for the country that established it. Yeah, they could have adjusted it, but it ends up with a country losing property, weakening its political system, leading to numerous turnovers and revolutions, and we don't really see anything concrete until Mao. I would say even to the 1970s, Mao it finally calms down.
Wow, that's a really long time in between those two.
Yeah, we don't, we have, the Great Leap and all that. Within that, there's so much chaos within the Chinese system that really stemmed from the British poking at the Opium Wars. The first one, at least. So I hope I got a lot of that in, and I really suggest I pulled a lot from the Asia Pacific curriculum and MIT visualization of the first Opium War to get an basic understanding of it. So I suggest you go and dig deeper. It's really deep. It's a great topic, but this is a good overview to understand how this comes about. Yeah. How do you feel?
I feel like this is a lot, these wars have huge political ramifications. They lasted for hundreds of years, and it all happened because the British wanted to sell a little bit of opium in China. Mm-hmm. I mean, and yeah, it started because of this whole trade loop, but
yeah, it ends up lasting.
It's wild how politically significant and militarily significant this ended up being.
Yeah, it lasts about 10 years, but it impacts over a century of history.
Definitely, and I feel like we're still seeing arguments very similar to this today.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. You'll read something and be like, oh, I just read this the other day about something modern, and it blows your mind that we're having the same conversation. We haven't learned anything.
Right. I mean, I'm always so skeptical of whenever anybody says, oh, history repeats itself, you know, and in hearing that and studying history, you hear that hundreds and hundreds of times over. And even in law, you're just like, oh, yeah, history repeats itself. We get it. But no, it really does. Like,
It doesn't. It just adapts to the situation, and you have to learn from how the country dealt with it in the past, dealt with the situation in the past. Like, look, oh, it did this, so maybe we should adapt our situation. And I hate when people say history.
I know, it's horrible. It really is completely overused. It's ridiculous, but it wouldn't be so overused if it weren't at least a little bit true.
The truth is, situations that appear similar keep popping up, and we don't adapt to them. Yeah, it's frustrating, and
there's a reason that legal precedent even exists. You know, if every case were different than the last one, there wouldn't be any reason to have such precedent.
Yeah, and the thing is, people don't learn from the basis before, so we have to build that precedent, and I think that's the key. But we should end it before we go into a deep debate.
Oh, we definitely should.
We have another one to record. So, thank you, Meredith, for coming on.
Of course.
Traveling so far. We're going to go finish our cupcakes.
Yay.
And we'll see you next week with Meredith's story. Woo! Woo! I get to drink quietly in the corner. I'm just excited. So, we'll see you next week. Bye!
Bye!
What podcast brings you true stories of exceptionally smart and insanely dumb crimes every week?
Dumb and Busted, obviously.
But Hannah, where's your one-stop shop if you want to hear about a killer nurse, a pervy arsonist, or a group of hella old dudes breaking into a vault?
Dumb and Busted. Allison, come on, seriously? We host the show together.
Okay, last question. Where can I go if I need to hear the number one song of 1999, I Want It That Way?
What? The Backstreet Boys album Millennium? How did we even get on this tangent?
Oh, okay. Sorry for being the only one who's ever fallen victim to their tight harmonies and timeless songs. Anyway, please listen and subscribe to Dumb and Busted on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Crime you later!
Hey, it's Erin.
And this is Jordan.
Each week, we dig up the facts on fascinating felonies
and mesmerizing misdemeanors.
Join us as we prove that you don't have to know too much about the legal system to be crazy for a good true crime story.
Subscribe to Crime Crazy on iTunes or your favorite podcast app.
And visit us at crimecrazypodcast.com.
He doesn't even go here.
Of Domesticity. We're available on all podcatchers. Remember to rate, review, subscribe to help spread the word, or just force other people to listen to it. Our Facebook and Twitter are at Domestic Podcast, and our Instagram is at the Cult of Domesticity. We also have podcast merch at Threadless. As well, if you want to support us financially or show some appreciation, we have a PayPal tip jar and a Patreon, which has some pretty great perks. Any topic suggestions, feel free to email us at domesticpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to stay domestic and cult-free.